ADHD Babes, the podcast, a podcast hosted by the ADHD Babes community for the community. Please note, nothing mentioned during the podcast is meant as a diagnosis. If you believe you have ADHD, please seek professional advice and visit or join ADHDbabes.com for help with diagnosis. No clinical diagnosis is required to join. And now, you're listening to the next episode of ADHD Babes, the podcast.
ADHD Babes, the podcast is introducing Dear Babes. We want to hear from you. Don't be shy. We know you have questions and we are here to answer them. Send your questions on how to manage the post-diagnosis/self-diagnosis grief. And we have Vivian Esebo, psychological practitioner, MSc, and Jay Reed, JD, MSW, and certified therapist, ready on our special Dear Babes episodes to answer your questions. So don't forget to check out the episode to see if your question was selected. Leave a question for us using the link in the show notes. Closing dates for submission is the 25th of August 2024. Welcome back to another episode with us at ADHD Babes, the podcast. Thank you to everyone who has joined us so far. Please do not forget to follow, leave us a rating and review, and share with others. Today's episode is hosted by me, Julez, and today we are being joined by Megan Brown-Enyia, and she is the founder of ADHD at Work, an organization dedicated to helping individuals and businesses thrive in the workplace. Welcome, Megan.
Hi, thank you for having me.
It's an absolute pleasure to have you on ADHD Babes, the podcast. For those who are new to you and what you do, please tell us a bit about yourself and when you got formally diagnosed.
Sure. So yes, I am a business owner with ADHD, and I was diagnosed in my late 30s. I don't know, should I spoil it and just tell everybody how old I am? And so it's been about 3 years, I think now, 3 or 4 years now. So I got diagnosed, during the pandemic when everything was going crazy and, ADHD information was going viral on social media. And then I started to realize that I was the person in the social media posts that I was seeing. And on top of it, I was working for an early childhood intervention center in Washington, D.C. And, we were working with 3 to 5 year olds on a regular basis. And, our staff was diagnosing children for early intervention daily. And it wasn't until 10 years later after working in special education that I realized that I had ADHD myself. Yeah. So, when you talk to your coworkers and they're like, oh, you definitely have ADHD. I'm like, you couldn't have told me that 10 years ago.
I know that feeling, trust me.
Especially when, you're working with professionals that do the diagnostic testing for conditions like this. And then, they see you every day and you're like, it would have been helpful if I would have known.
It's so interesting because it's the same for me when it comes to my family. Specifically, I have a younger sibling, and she was like, oh yeah, I kind of gathered. I was just like, so no one was going to inform me about
exactly friends, family, everybody. They're like, oh yeah, you definitely have ADHD. And I'm like, yeah, that makes sense.
It's so interesting.
Yes.
But by the way, I love your website and everything you stand for. I was looking over it and I was like, this is so amazing. And it's just like, oh, I wish you were in the UK.
I know. And I wish that the United States had a lot of the services that the UK has. The UK is definitely more advanced when it comes to diagnosing and treating ADHD for sure.
Absolutely, definitely. But in regards to your website, what was the turning point for you before starting ADHD at Work, where working in a corporate environment wasn't catered to your individual needs as a woman with ADHD?
Yeah, I was actually working for the government. So after I left the early intervention center, I went for another government agency, and at that point, I knew that I was diagnosed. So then because I was working in special education, supporting families on advocating on behalf of their children, in addition to like talking to people about what does it mean to get a diagnosis and going through that process, I was already in a position to be an advocate, right? And so I'm already starting um, from that starting point as like, I am going to be an advocate for myself. So when I joined this new organization, the first thing I was like, well, I want accommodations. And so, because I was realizing that it was really starting to, now that I knew more about ADHD, I realized where it was impacting me at work. And then that process was horrible. And so again, I'm always wearing an advocacy hat. When I left that agency, I realized I was like, okay, let me combine my background in HR, my background in social work, operations, business, and now this newfound interest in ADHD and better understanding myself. Let me figure out a way to help other people that are like me. So I started this company, like working with women with ADHD and trying to help them thrive at work and understand the accommodations process here in the States, in addition to like how to better work with your manager, and also helping leadership work with adults and with ADHD as well. Once I got diagnosed, I realized that not only am I an adult with ADHD, but I'm a manager with ADHD, and better understanding like how as a manager, I'm impacting my employees. And then also my employees, my direct reports disclose too. So now we have ADHD on top of ADHD. And so let's just say our meetings, our check-ins were very long.
Yep.
And when I left the government space, I decided to start my own company so that I can help support people in this, that are operating within these challenges, because it doesn't have to be difficult. It is difficult, but it doesn't have to be difficult. And people need to better understand the tools so that they can position themselves for success.
Absolutely. And it's so interesting you say that in regards to kind of like the workspace, as somebody who comes, I'm kind of like not working in the moment, but I'm a corporate girly. So having to come into the corporate space and then feel like, explaining that, I have ADHD or I'm neurodivergent, and immediately kind of looked at as, oh, can she manage? Is she able to do the work? And I think that that's a lot of so that's I'm one of many who probably feel exactly the same way when they go into the workplace and trying to, I guess, fit in to being neurotypical, and sometimes trying to explain, actually these are the adjustments that are really helpful for me to be able to be an efficient work employee in the workspace. And sometimes it can be quite challenging, so it's always nice to have people that advocate for ADHD, and just neurodivergence in general, because the more of us that are in these spaces and the more of us that are managers, the more it feels like we are seen and we're able to kind of just say that, look, this is who I am. And your manager being aware of, oh, okay, I understand that too, or being educated and being aware that, it's not a hindrance. How can we make things work for our employee and make sure that they are reaching the best of their ability in the workspace?
Yeah, exactly. And so, during my social work program, I actually studied management and leadership practices and just organizational development in general, just from a social work perspective. And, when you're taking these classes, whether or not they're in school of social work, whether or not they're in business, there aren't specific classes, or at least there weren't when I was in school, around managing employees that have a difference when it comes to the neurological and behavior, and like whether or not they have ADHD or they're neurodivergent. And so, there's some of this stuff I had to relearn, right? So as a manager, and be like, okay, these are the things that I was taught to be an effective manager, and then realizing that some of those techniques were clearly designed for neurotypicals. And like, nobody was going to tell you in my management class that if you both have ADHD, your meetings are going to be 3 times longer. And so you need to put in strategies in place so that does not happen.
Hmm.
and that you actually have effective outcomes from these different meetings. And so it's important to know how your ADHD is impacting your work, for sure.
Yeah. And that goes on to, I guess, my next question around it working in sort of a neurotypical environment can be extremely challenging. Reports have suggested, or reports suggest, that people with ADHD are 60% more likely to lose their jobs, or 3 times more likely to quit impulsively. And this is according to the ADHD Association 2023. And as well as a lot of these workspaces claiming to be accepting and welcoming of neurodivergent individuals, but when it comes to providing the necessary support and work adjustments for that individual to thrive, it becomes a challenge for them to provide and support that person's needs, leaving the person struggling and potentially being unable to do the work. What do you think needs to change in these workspaces, basically? I feel like it's a loaded question, and there's so much to unpack with that.
There's so much there, right? And so one is always going to start with mindset, and also making sure that people are practicing what they preach. And so, it's one thing to say that, yes, this is a welcoming environment. Yes, this is supportive of the neurodivergent staff and employees, and we are all inclusive, like blah, 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 blah. But sometimes that is lip service. And then when you start to take a look at their policies and practices, it doesn't reflect that same thought. And so it's going to take some time to make those transitions, and it's going to take some time for people to review their policies, and then also to make sure that they are practicing inclusive, or they have inclusive practices. So for example, you're saying that you're welcoming for the neurodivergent employee, but your application process requires you to submit a resume, then to fill out this application into your software, so that you're using the software that's already biased, that's screening out people before they even have the opportunity to interview. You're coming to the interview, you're not prepared with your questions, or you're not providing the questions beforehand, or even giving people the option to ask to see if they want the questions beforehand. And so how inclusive are you? And so and so there's so many things that you can do to present yourself as an inclusive organization that practices inclusivity from the beginning. And so when I'm reading your position description, does it make sense for the neurodiverse reader? When I'm looking at your interview process, does it make sense? When I'm applying for your position, does it make sense? And so all of those for me now scream like, okay, this place isn't really inclusive like they want to be in theory, but they're having some challenges and they need to know how to fix it.
And that's so interesting. Going back to what you said about the application, I actively avoid. So when I apply for jobs and they're like, fill out these questions, I'm like, why? And it takes me, I could just about fill out my name, let alone having to then ask, why do I want the job? Isn't this the reason why we have interview processes afterwards? To then make me sit there and have to fill it out and have to think about and then do research. It feels like it's a task before actually even getting the job. So it feels like it's a challenge even before you even get into the room. And you're 100% right. It feels like a lot of companies like the idea of being inclusive. But when it comes to doing the work, it feels extremely difficult for them, because it feels like they have to then cater to fit everybody's needs. And it's just like, oh, well, we don't want to deal with that challenge. Let's just do all size fits all and just hope for the best. When in reality, it's all sizes doesn't fit all. You have to consider the things that, people might need help with, or, the processes and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, the overall hiring process is was built, I don't even know how many years ago, right? And so we're in a position right now where we need to say, okay, we need to scratch some of the things that we've been doing for decades and do something different, and to recognize that we're serving different types of people. And so how can we make this process easier for people to apply? Because you're already screening out people that really could do the job, but they don't want to go through the application process, and that application process isn't reflective of what the task is that they're actually going to be doing. And so what are you actually testing?
Yeah.
And that's the same thing for the cover letter, right? And so it's like you have a blank piece of paper, and now everybody's using AI, and there was some article out actually about like how some companies or everybody was receiving the same cover letter, because everybody was using AI to create it.
Because it's just kind of like, oh.
Exactly. Nobody wants to do it in the first place. And so nobody, and then on top of it, like you ask for a resume, you ask them to fill out the application that has the exact same information as the resume. Then you ask for a cover letter, and then you also ask short questions that are really supposed to be answered in the cover letter. And so it's like, why are you asking for all of these things? By doing all of that, you're actually weeding out an entire population of people. And I have absolutely no data to back this up. And so let me be clear about that. But I would bet you that a good chunk of the people that are saying no are also neurodivergent.
That's interesting.
I wouldn't be surprised. You know, if I was getting a doctorate now, like maybe I would study that. You know, but I would not be surprised if a good chunk of the people that were saying like, you know what, I'm not going to apply to this job, have ADHD.
Yeah. I think sometimes that is how I feel. Like, if I know that I have to answer 10 questions, I'm just like, this is not worth it. It's not worth it. And you're not guaranteed to get into the room. And then the sense of feeling rejected because you've put so much effort into that application, and you feel, I've aced this. They're definitely going to call me up, to then get a generic response of, hi, we received 1,000 applications. And unfortunately, and it's just kind of like, do you not understand the work? And I guess it goes for everyone, but somebody who has ADHD and also who has rejection sensitivity, is it disorder or dysphoria?
Dysphoria.
Yeah, it can be even more challenging, because then you kind of just automatically blame yourself and you feel like you failed. And it's just a small application.
And then it's going to take you another 3 weeks to fill out another one.
Exactly, because you're still hurting from the one that you had to do, the burnout you probably received from having to fill out that application, to then be like, no, it's a no. And then you're just like, how am I going to recover from this?
Right. Yeah. But then, it has a triple effect, right? And so we're currently in a situation where ADHDers are underemployed. And so now we're being taxed with this task that is taxing all of our weaker executive functions that are not even necessary for the position in of itself. And so now, and then if we do get an interview, then the interview process is like a whole other thing. And so it's like interviewing with inclusive practices in mind as well. And so but you read these diversity statements on these websites that make you believe that this is something that they care about. But when it comes to, and I'm sure they do, I'm sure people have like their best interest in heart, but like what really needs to happen within these organizations is to make sure that they're practicing what they preach. And it's going to require them to really audit a lot of their policies in order to make it a really inclusive environment.
Yeah. And do you reckon, I think this is more of a question that's off. Do you reckon that HR really, human resources really need to kind of like educate themselves more, to then kind of spread that education across their businesses? Because I feel like that's where it should sort of start. Naturally, everyone thinks, it should start from the CEO. But if you're looking at it, HR needs to be on job, because that's their responsibility when it comes to employing people, when it comes to obviously working for the employer, but also educating themselves and being able to then go on and educate the rest of the business.
So I agree but disagree. So I would say that it actually is the leader's responsibility, because the reality is like HR is another department within that overall company. But if the CEO isn't interested in moving forward in this particular direction, then HR's hands are going to be tied. And so no matter how much they want to do this, the direction is going to be coming from the senior leadership.
Mm.
And so if the senior leadership isn't on board, then it's going to be really difficult in order to implement these changes. So
Yeah,
it really does start from the top.
Mm. Yeah, it's an interesting one, because even when I kind of like think about the spaces I've worked in, and like I mentioned, I work in corporate, so a lot of the roles I do, I'm an executive assistant, so I work for very senior people in the businesses, and I'm sort of I want to, be transparent, but sometimes being transparent feels like it's then used against you. So as somebody who I recently, I'm very open actually. I recently was let go from a role which I was directly supporting the CEO of a business, and the reason why I was let go, and I say this very loosely, was that I wasn't proactive enough. So it was a very generic sort of, it's not working. You're just not proactive enough. When I know in reality, because I was transparent about my ADHD and in ways they can just adjust for me to be a very effective employee. I think they just didn't want to do the job. They didn't want to do the work to be able to allow me to do my job effectively. And you are kind of left feeling like, where would I find the space to feel that I can be able to, for people to be able to see that I can do the work, if the support and the adjustments are there, then the world is my oyster. But again, like you said, it is kind of thinking about, it has to come from the top down for it to be able to, for people to be able to really sort of understand and do the work within workplaces and stuff.
And within my practice, like I want to be able to serve the ADHD community in both sides, right? And so ADHDers need to better understand how ADHD is impacting their work, and they need to be able to understand what their strengths and what their weaknesses are, and what appropriate accommodations or adjustments are needed in order to be effective at what it is that they're doing. At the same time, the business environment itself needs to shift also, and to make sure that they're providing a space that is welcoming and supportive of the ADHD brain as well. And, that requires them maybe to be a little bit more flexible in their own thinking when it comes to how they want to run their business, and how they want to manage and lead their people. And so, going from both ends of the candlestick, I guess, burning both ends of the candlestick, if that makes sense.
Which kind of leads me to something that I saw on your website, which I love. I love the acronym you have for ADHD, which is A for advocacy, D for development, H for holistic approach, and D for diversity. And how did you come to this way of working, and why is this approach important?
Well, we talked a little bit about advocacy. So in diversities, and so I'm only going to mention that a little bit, but the reality is like, in order to be successful in your role, you're going to have to learn how to be a self-advocate. And that is just the reality of the situation that we're currently living in, where the world around us isn't really designed for the neurodiverse brain or the ADHD brain. And so strengthening your own self-advocacy skills is going to be important. And that's some of the conversations that I have with my clients. And then once you further understand how ADHD is impacting your world, then you can develop some additional skills, and also develop some tools, and develop some resources and strategies, and also help redevelop the environment that you're in as well. And so, all around the holistic approach is like, it's coming from both ends. Like, it's not just necessarily working with the ADHDer, because everybody will say to the ADHDer, it's like, you need to change, you need to do this, you need to do that. And the reality is, the world needs to do a whole lot of things. Yes, me as with somebody with ADHD, yes, I do have some things that I need to shift. Absolutely. But this environment also needs to shift too. And so we're going to have to take a holistic approach when it comes to making it an easier space for people with ADHD to work. And diversity, I mean, that's just important anyway. And so, and especially when you think about, like, this is a podcast of Black women with ADHD. And so, we're in these work environments, and we're wearing a lot of different identities, right? And so once we do become stronger advocates, in some cases, depending on where you're working, you may have to pick and choose which advocacy hat you want to wear that day. Are you going to be wearing an advocate for women, because a lot of corporate America is men, right? And so do you have to be an advocate on yourself, on behalf of yourself, when it comes to just being a woman in a predominantly male environment? Do you need to advocate as like just being Black in a white environment? And so what does that look like there? And then you also tack on the ADHD part. And so sometimes you just you have to know where you're working and what's really gonna work for you. And you may have to pick and choose which advocacy hat you're gonna wear that day. So Monday it might be just being Black in a white space. Tuesday it may be being a woman. Wednesday it may be the ADHD thing. And so it's like, are you prepared for that? I don't want to say fight, but are you prepared for that journey? Maybe I'll use that word instead.
No, I hear it 100%. And I think just naturally as ADHDers, we're immediately like, any sort of injustice we want to do, like, we've got to save the situation, we've got to wear the advocacy hat, because you just feel like, no, I've got to change the world. I have to do it. There must be a way, because this injustice is not fair.
It's not fair. And then you have to do it today, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And so sometimes we also need to hang up the advocacy hats and get our work done.
Yeah, this is absolutely true. It's so interesting, because like where I've previously worked, I'm kind of like, yeah, I can do the work, but I'm always sort of interested in, why is this not done in the workspace? Why isn't this available for people? So then I enter this rabbit hole of like, who can I contact in a business around this? Is this something marketing can help me with? And I'm like, Jules, do your work. Like, you got stuff to do. I know you want to save the world today, save the planet in the business, but you might have to hold out for just another day or two, because they ain't paying you for that.
I know, and it's hard, because like, you can't necessarily control the flow of thoughts, but you can control what you do with them. Yeah. And so, sometimes even when I'm like, I always read better when I'm on a plane. Well, I used to before I was flying with an 8-month-old. When I was flying by myself, I could reading on the plane was great, but even when I'm reading these books, like, I would still have random thoughts. And so I just I put in my own strategies in place. It's like, if I wanted to get through this book on this plane, then I needed to do something with these thoughts. And so I created like a little parking lot. So I would always bring Post-its with me and a pen whenever I'm reading, so that when I do randomly think of something, I can just write it down and I can move forward.
That's such a good tool. I need to really do that, because I have the same thing sometimes, and maybe that's my problem. I'm always, when you're reading something and you just read the same sentence 4 times, because you've got something else in your mind, and you're just like, for me to be able to digest this, but I'm still thinking about what's gone on in here. So I'm not taking the information in a book, but Post-its and a pen, I'm going to start doing that.
Yeah, and then by the time the plane lands, the front of my book is like covered with all different Post-its, and I'm like, I'll deal with these later. But I was like, but I finally got through the chapter. I'm like, I wish I had this strategy when I was in grad school, but trying to read all these dense research articles.
But yeah, oh God, I could sit here and talk about all the different things, the little nuances, and I'm sure everyone that's listening will probably have the same. They're literally probably nodding their head like, yeah, this is pretty much my life. So I want to kind of like go back to being a Black woman with ADHD. And I guess the question I would want to ask is, what advice would you give Black women with ADHD in a working world that has that difficult line manager, or is struggling to feel fulfilled in their role?
Hmm. One question I would ask um, is, do you know your strengths? Are you clear what your strengths are? Because we can be in an environment will constantly beat us to the core, and really hold on tightly to what your strengths are, and really being able to know who you are as a person, right? And so one is, do you know your strengths and are you leveraging them? And are you in a position where you're leveraging, especially if you're in a work environment that you're unhappy or you feel unfulfilled, you're working with a difficult manager? Do you know what you bring to the table, and are you able to hold on to that information? And do you even have that information written somewhere? Are you constantly reminding yourself what that information is? Um, and then something else I would suggest is seeking a network. And so, are you in a network or in a social group of something with other people, other Black women that are like you, so that you have someone to lean on, someone to ask questions, whether or not it's a support group, whether or not it's an online community, whether or not it's a professional organization. There are several available. I started it's not specifically for Black women, but it is for women with ADHD. I started a Facebook group as well around being able to network with each other. And the reason behind why I created the Facebook group is for this particular reason, to seek support. So having other women with ADHD, knowing that like if you're looking for a new job, you're looking to network, if you're looking to start a business and you have questions, it's a space for you to be able to unmask and be able to ask those without the fear of being judged, without the fear of being looked at sideways. Like you want to be able to be in a safe space, and that's why these communities exist, right? And so like you have your community as well, the ADHD babes, like it's established for a reason. And then the other thing I would and also in those spaces too, you can ask for mentorship, and you can also ask for professional development too, if that's necessary. The other thing is like, we talked about advocacy, but that's another one, being able to advocate for yourself. And like, do you have the resources, and do you know who to ask within your organization to get additional supports? You should not be in a position where you're miserable at all. Ask yourself, is that the job for you? Something that I do with my clients is I specifically have them do an executive functioning assessment. And so that's the opportunity for you to actually see and better understand what your stronger and your weaker executive functions are. And then from there, being able to see like, okay, this is the position I'm in. How often do I have the opportunity to use my stronger executive functions, and how many times like throughout the day, and how many tasks are taxing my weaker executive functions? And then if you're being 90% of your day is using your weaker executive functions, you're going to just be burnt out, and you're going to be unhappy, and you're going to be miserable, because everything is just going to be harder. Especially if you don't have any supports or accommodations in place.
Yeah.
And so, yeah.
That's really, really interesting. And yeah, I couldn't agree more with like what you're saying around the executive functions. And I've started to thinking about what are my strengths when it comes to the working environment, and also articulating that to, say, the line manager or, HR, and what they can then put in place to kind of just strengthen the weaker, and I wouldn't say they're weaknesses, but strengthen the weaker sort of like executive functions that you're not good at, like make better use of it, and your time as well. So yeah. I'm really kind of just like thinking and taking it all in, because I feel like having this conversation with you right now is really, I'm sure for people that are listening, it's resonating for them, but it's really resonating for me, especially with kind of like what I'm feeling I'm currently like facing, especially within the workplace. And I think even now, I'm thinking about changing careers, because it feels like I want to use my strengths in a more fulfilling environment. And sometimes, not to say that being an executive assistant isn't fulfilling. People find it fulfilling. I think for myself, it's got to a point where it's just like, it's not bringing me joy, you know. as
Mm-hmm.
Marie Kondo will say, what's bringing you joy? It's just bringing
Right.
me joy.
Uh-huh.
Working this way is not
Exactly.
bringing me joy. So, yeah, it is about doing that. But then also to come off of that, and I don't know what it's like in the US, but in the UK, sometimes it can feel like you are in a space where actually I know what my strengths are. I want to go for this particular role. I know that my skills are transferable, but you're
Mm-hmm.
constantly getting knocked back because your resume, your CV doesn't look like a CV that they expect to get when it comes to the role that they've advertised.
Yeah, and if it was up to me, I would trash the whole process in general. Personally, and this is neurotypical or neurodiverse, it doesn't matter. Like we all have executive functioning strengths and weaknesses. And personally, I think that people should be doing positions that they're actually good at naturally.
Mm,
And stop positioning people like I don't think positions in general are organized properly. Like when you look at position descriptions and you're kind of expect like some of the job duties and responsibilities, they seem to reflect all of the executive functions need to be like strong. And so like what if we transitioned in creating work positions that chunked them, almost like chunked the duties by different types of executive function strengths. Does that make sense? Yeah, so it would be interesting to see how we could reorganize roles based on your executive function strengths and weaknesses. And so because we all have them, like with my husband, I made him do an executive function assessment too. And our executive function strengths and weaknesses are complete opposite. And it works like in our household because we can lean on each other's strengths and then maximize and and support each other's weaknesses. And so, for example, like I may put the laundry in, but I don't have the good working memory to remember that I have laundry that is in the washing machine. But he does. And so by the time that I remember to take the washing, like the wash out of the washer to put it in the dryer, he's already put it in the dryer. And so then now I can fold it. Um, and so like we maximize the opportunities to lean on each other's strengths, so that we're not constantly in a place where we're criticizing or nitpicking on each other's weaker executive functions. But it needs to happen in the workplace too. Like imagine if you had the opportunity to really just focus on your stronger executive functions and then give the tasks that are related to your weaker executive functions to somebody else.
I have a bit of a question about this. I'm just sitting here like mulling, and I'm like, I need to answer this. So you were talking talking about executive functions. Like one thing I think I see on like job posts quite frequently is the fact that they want someone with interpersonal skills and that knows how to empathize with others. I slowly learned that that was a skill. Like I just thought that that was like a given with people. But I also find that ADHDers are the ones who people want to go in to confide in the workplace. They are the people who are actually interpersonal.
Mm-hmm.
But the point in which you put ADHD on your CV, it's almost like it doesn't matter.
Right. Because people don't know anything about ADHD. And so, and that's why, like, even on my own website, what I've been trying to do is I've been going through all of the different executive functions and then writing a post about it and explaining what it is, explaining how it impacts the employee, explaining how it impacts the employer, and then building in some accommodations from both perspectives. Like here, employee, this is some things that you need to do. Here, employer, here are some other things that you need to do in order to best like optimize how to best use your employee with ADHD that has this executive function strength or weakness. And so so for example, I just did one recently on metacognition and like fully better understanding like big picture thinking, as well as being able to like take a bird's eye view on like oneself and one situation, right? And so like, a lot of ADHDers can see 3 miles ahead, especially when they're working with leaders that like don't know what they're doing. And so you'd be like, you can do this if you want to, but like it's like almost you can see in the future a little bit, right? That's
yep.
what sometimes it feels like that. Like you can see in the future, like if you can go left if you want to, but you're gonna fall down a cliff. And then you can sometimes be in a position where you're saying all of this and like nobody believes you. And then 5 years later, when everybody's in the ditch, they're like, oh, I wonder what happened. It's like, well, you should have just listened to the ADHDer who told you to not do this in the first place.
Mm.
And so it's like, how are you as a business, how are you accessing the brilliance of the ADHD brain instead of constantly criticizing it because it doesn't meet your expectations?
Absolutely. Just it's exactly that. Sorry, I've got lost and fumbled the words. Because yeah, even just like thinking about it, like all the skills that you kind of see on job descriptions, and you're just like, I can do that. Like, for example, when people say work under pressure, honestly, no one will ever see me sweat. And everyone's just like, why are you so calm? I used to work in an environment where the smallest thing could make someone I worked with panic. And I just looked at her and just like, why are you panicking? It's actually not that deep. If you actually thought 3 steps ahead or just take a moment, you can get it done. So kind of
Exactly.
when I see people like just be like, oh my God, I'm just like, how did you even get the job? Because like there's constantly working in a fast-paced environment, working under pressure, and you just see people, neurotypical people, just break, and you're just like, but this
Yeah,
was part of your.
I used to get criticized in my work when I was doing some emergency response work, and everybody was like, "How come you're not?" Like, people didn't think that I was taking the situation seriously because I wasn't flipping out, and I'm like, "I'm not." I'm like, "Do you want me to be emotionally dysregulated, or do you want me to just handle this so that we can be safe?" Those are your two options, and so it's I'm not presenting as though I'm freaking out because I'm not. And so because I can thrive in this particular space. And so let me thrive. Let me make sure everybody is safe and make sure that everybody has what they need. And then nobody has to freak out anymore.
Yeah, and to be honest with you, our problem solving is immaculate.
We're really good problem solvers. Can be really adaptive too. We're really creative thinkers. These are our strengths, and it's like how like our businesses encouraging their employees to brainstorm, like their employees with ADHD to brainstorm. Like, are they facilitating environments where employees can share their ideas freely and the ability to think outside of the box? Are they giving them that space to do that? Are they recognizing and rewarding the unique problem solving methods that leads to breakthroughs? Like, there's so many organizations and so many inventions that have been created with the ADHD brain that would not have been created from a neurotypical. And so are you providing the opportunity for people to exercise and utilize those skills? Or are you just expecting them to just, I don't know. I don't know. I lost the words there.
Yeah, no, no, I know exactly what you mean. But yeah, this has been such a cool conversation. I definitely feel like I've taken a lot of things away from the chat, and I'm sure our listeners have as well. It's refreshing and affirming to know that, despite how the workspace can feel very, I guess, the workplace for somebody who has ADHD, being a Black woman, can be difficult sometimes, but being able to kind of like know that there are people that are advocating, like yourselves, and creating spaces where people can come to you and get the support and the coaching to be able to continue in work environments and to be the best versions of themselves in the workspaces. So it's I'm sure we can sit here and talk about this for the longest time and talk about experiences of being in the workplace and what we can do. I guess to kind of like to wrap up, is there anything you'd like to share about what you have coming up, your business, ADHD at work?
Sure. I do have so if everybody goes to my website, you can download a free document around 4 strategies to help regulate your emotions at work. That is free. Just put in your email address and you can download that. And then I also do have a ebook up there as well about just navigating the workspace in general and asking yourself 10 questions like, should I disclose at work? Should I disclose my ADHD at work? And some things to take into consideration. It is very US focused, but the information will still be relevant for anybody living all over the world. I am working, and then I also do have the Facebook group available as well, and I'll send you the link. I'll send you the link for that so people can join. I do want this to be a space where people that are entrepreneurs or in regular 9-to-5ers going to be able to connect and have it be a space where you can unmask and ask questions. There's ADHDers in every position in the world, despite what people may think. But we also hire, right? So we are business owners. We also are working in leadership positions. We're working in HR, and we have positions open. And so we know how to be able to tap into our own community, to be able to recruit and to be able to ask questions. Or it's like, let's say I'm interviewing for a job. It's like, hey, I need somebody to practice with. Like, I want this to be able to space where people can lean on each other that are going through the 9-to-5 like work challenges and processes and procedures. But then also for business owners, like, are you looking for grants? Are you having a really hard time, like, just making sure that you update your business license, like leaning on each other, be like, okay, how do I get through this process? Do I need to body double? And so I really want it to be a supportive space for each other. And I also am working on a group coaching program as well. And that's going to be taking my work over to a whole new level. So I want to be able to provide some group coaching, some opportunities, and also there's going to be some short videos for people to listen to that will further explain ADHD, further explain the executive functions, then other things that may be coming up. There also will be a private Slack group that people can join as well as an additional community and be able to download workbooks and to kind of see what accommodations would be helpful for you based on your own executive function skills. So that should be coming in the fall. I'm also presenting at the ADHD conference in Anaheim in California in November. So register for the International ADHD Conference. I will be hosting a support group for ADHD entrepreneurs and doing a presentation on virtual work in ADHD and some tips and strategies to help support that as well.
Oh,
and so
that
those
all
are
sounds amazing.
Yeah. So I have a lot coming up, trying to do it all and trying to navigate being a mom with an 8-month-old.
Oh, wow.
all at the same time. Yes.
That sounds amazing. And just to kind of just like wrap things up, thank you so much, Megan, for joining us for this episode. If any of our listeners would like to connect with you, how can they get in touch?
They can actually schedule a free 20 minutes with me through my website at adhdatwork.co. They can also reach me on Instagram as well. And you can send me a DM. You can also email me at Megan@adhdatwork.co too. But if I'm being honest, DM is probably faster, or to just book an appointment.
Amazing.
Email and ADHD don't go together.
This is You're like, oh, so I'll respond to that email, and then all of a sudden that email gets lost in hundreds of emails, and you're like,
I have strategies, but for me right now, the best strategy is to like just don't email, like just use a different way to get in contact with me.
Oh, thank you so much for joining us for this episode. Please feel free to follow our podcast so you don't miss any future episodes, and follow ADHD Babes on socials to continue the conversation. ADHD Babes members can also join the conversation on our members only Discord and WhatsApp group. So consider signing up and supporting us in doing more great work to support you, our wonderful community of ADHD babes. Once again, would love if you could leave us a rating and review and let everyone know your thoughts. Thank you for listening, and we will catch you next time. Bye.
Thanks for listening to this episode of ADHD Babes, the podcast. If you're a Black woman or non-binary person and need help and support in managing your ADHD or advice on diagnosis, please visit adhdbabes.com. No clinical diagnosis is required to join. Join us in 2 weeks for a new episode. Until then, all the love from the ADHD Babes team.
Just as I am, can you take me just as I am?